Okay, this one has been long overdue. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of I wanted to put it off again, but I can always upload another. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go with this for now. I'm gonna work as well while I'm doing this one. But we gotta talk about something that it's been on my mind for a while. For a while, I will say that for some years actually. Why is the black society the way it is? Why is that normal? Why is it normal for us to have emasculated men and masculine women? And also just to kind of talk about what I've discovered for the time being as to what came first, because everybody likes to point fingers and blame everybody else. The men like to point the finger at the women, even though they're they're talking about the men of old. And the women like to point the finger at men, even though they're doing the same thing, talking about the women of old. For some reason, people like to hold up this divide, even though we're talking about a generation of people that is not us. So when I talk about men back in the day, I'm talking about a whole nother generation of men. Just because I'm a man does not mean I'm going to take up for them. Same thing for the women. I'm not a woman, but I would assume if you're a woman talking about the women of old, you wouldn't just take up for them because you're a woman. That's not logical. I'm a little more reasonable here. I give what I get, meaning I can only tell you what I know. And, since people like to point fingers and blame people and talk about some sort of gender war bullshit, I mean, you know, I never thought there was a war, as dumb as, I mean, it sounds stupid if you think about it. But I never really thought there was ever a gender war or anything of that nature. I mean, women will be women. They can assume, they can try to do what they want to do. But for guys like myself, I could never, I mean, I could never hate women as a gender. That's not what I do. I mean, I love women. Absolutely. And it's just like, why the hell would I find a reason to hate on them? I mean, I've talked about this before, how when I got to the red pill community, I did sense a bit of misogyny. I talked about me diving into the red pill community. I talked about that. I was there. I was talking to the people because, I had, of course, heard from the women that they were y'all all, all guys are if you don't do what they say, you're a misogynist and yada yada yada. Of course, they won't tell you that they're misandrist, but like I said, they're quick to call you a misogynist, right? Because if you don't agree with them, that's what women do. Well, now, ironically, I mean, I'm talking about emasculated men here, right? Now the guys seem to want to do the same thing. They want to take the tactics of the women and be like, "Oh, well, anything you can do, we can do too." So now they're pointing the finger and calling women misandrist. So, oh boy. So there are some truths on both. I always talk about the two radicals. You have the radicals on the women's side, usually the liberal third wave feminists who hate everything to do with men. Equality is not the goal, and but they have society on their side because the majority of society is women. And you have, in addition to that, you have guys that do align with them because they would like to try to align with women. And the women that know better to align with them, unfortunately, tend to align with them in secret because they don't want to be left out. So that's why the favor usually lies with the women. The law is objective, but enforcing it is subjective, and a police officer will always treat a hostile male differently than he will a hostile female. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the red pillars, the red ragers, or whatever the hell they want to call themselves, the MGTOWs, all of them, which I find it interesting. If you're going to be a MGTOW, then why the fuck are you still talking about issues with women? I mean, that's one thing I don't get. I've never gotten that. I was like, okay, mm, I'm getting a bit off topic. Let me. I'm sorry. I'm just siphoning. I'm going through my thoughts right now. But I do think about that. If you're a MGTOW, if you're a man going their own ways, then why the hell I mean, you have no reason to be talking about these issues. At least that's what I assumed. But anywho, let me get back on topic, right? So yes, as the same as those on the women's radical end of the spectrum, yes, a good deal of them are misogynistic. Yes, they are misogynist, as well as the women were and are misandrous. It's just hate on hate on hate. And then you got the people in the middle that just want to live their lives. They don't want to have to deal with this shit. But I will say this, as I said earlier, society tends to lean liberal. So the women do have favor. So the guys don't, the guys feel some type of way about that. And like I said, they're doing what women do. They're complaining about it. No, that's not fair. Trying to, point the fingers to blame. There is some blame here and there. I'm going to talk about that. What I've learned about the black community in general here in America. And some of those guys, well, I refer to them now today as being pseudo men. So they do take on the feminine uh, willingness to complain. I mean, that's what women do. Women always complain about problems. I talked about that in an earlier video. That is a feminine trait. Guys, we tend to withhold stuff too sometimes too much. That's actually one of the common tropes of a guy. Is a guy who's suffering, he'll suffer by himself, and he won't seek help for it, because as guys we tend to want to solve our problems versus complain about them. And there is a way to talk about your problems while trying to solve them. That's how that's what some smart guys, reasonable guys will do. But sometimes they can come and bite us in the butt, where guys tend not to reach out for help, and they tend to off themselves or do stuff that's unfavorable to themselves, right? So it's not there's a difference between complaining and conspiring, or trying to solve a problem, right? And these guys, too often, too much, I hear complaining. They talk about a problem just to talk about the problem and complain about it. They don't want to talk about or hear about any of the possible or potential solutions to said problem at all. And as a matter of fact, when I told you I was in that community thing for a while, I shit you not, I had just about every conversation I was in, I would offer potential solutions, and they go right back to some type of matter of fact, or once one in a million thing. Oh, well, this could happen, or that could happen, or I can get struck by lightning twice. I'm like some dumb shit just to try to disprove the solution I gave to the problem. Like they didn't want to hear it, because all they wanted to do was just complain about it. And I assume they thought that complaining about it would make the women feel sympathetic towards them or something, and then maybe things will change. I that's what I'm guessing. I don't know how you're gonna get respect out of that, but
Put some respect on my name. You understand me? When y'all saying my name, put some respect on it.
I mean, I didn't get it. I still don't get it, but I understand it, and I'm gonna talk about it. So let's get back to the topic. So what came first? You want to know something? What came first was actually something that took hundreds of years to happen or occur. It probably actually happened, let's say, what it's been roughly like 400 years, right? So let's say back in 1700s or something. Like I'm just giving an example. But what came first in the masculination of men or the masculine of women, right? I believe personally it was the emasculation of the men because when you it's either they were the ones that were left over were emasculated for the purposes of working. We all know the history of slavery. I've actually learned. I got Dr. Claude Anderson's book, and you know how we talk about how black people have pretty much created everything here in America. Well, get this. Matter of fact, let me go get that book. But let me say this first, and then I'll go get the book to try to cite from it. But in addition to black people pretty much creating everything you can think of in America, music, theater, even inventions, science, etc., right? Despite being not given the right tools, authority, and or education to do so, right? Get this. Black people even created the system of slavery that they were subjugated for the last 400 or 500 years. I know, I know. Some of y'all like the fuck you talking about. I know. But that whole thing of you're slave for life, it was it was first done by a black guy. So we literally created the very system of slavery that we were subjected to. Ain't that a bitch? Let me go get that book real quick. So let me leave you with this music, and I'm gonna go look at that book, and I'll even tell you what the book is. Hold on, I will be right back. Okay. Okay, I found it. I found it. So, of course, I still got a lot of reading to do. I got his whole series of books, by Dr. Cloud Anderson. I will be going through them all. But what I'm about to show you comes from a specific one. I'll try and pull it up. Where's my thing? Where's, okay, I'm in the wrong thing. But it comes from you from Dirty Little Secrets about Black history, its heroes, and other troublemakers. So it comes from his Dirty Little Secrets because, a lot of Black history isn't shared, obviously. A lot of it's hidden. People don't even really understand what uh I talked about the autobiography of Malcolm X. I'm going to also be reading the autobiography of Martin Luther King, and people didn't even understand. Like those two, they've been most misinterpreted, misunderstood, misquoted numerous times. And I'm going to make sure I talk about that once I, of course, read more on that. But Dirty Little Secrets by Dr. Claude Anderson. This is the book I was talking about. And let me see here. Talks about a lot of historical references, facts, and if I can find this, there was actually a court case. And if you didn't know, black people owned slaves once upon a, of course, here in America. So it wasn't just white people. Of course, as things got worse, white people decided to turn on all black people eventually. But black people aren't owned slaves. Of course, I already actually knew that the first cowboys were actually black men, um, and they were called cowboys for other reasons because, of course, they didn't want to refer to black men as men, and they referred to them as boys. And I forgot what the cow part was for, but yeah, the first actual cowboys, those Westerners and everything, the ones that actually had to go out west, they were actually black men. So I actually knew of that already, but that's also in here. But let me see here. I'm trying to find that court case. I might have to talk to my wife. Oh, it also talks about William Leadersdorf, and he actually owned what is now San Francisco. He was a black man. Like it talks about oh my God, it talks about a lot. Of course, there's the thing with the first cowboys, of course. Um, California's first and last black governor. It's a lot of stuff in here. Like you guys need to go check this book out. I'm not gonna lie. Hey, you. um, Man, I'm trying to find where it is. Anthony Johnson had the dubious honor of being the first American to hold a black person as a slave for life. For life. Meaning that was pretty much what set up what we know as today as as slavery in America. He was the first American to hold a slave for the entirety of their life. He said, "You're mine." Pretty much his slaves were his property. Of course, there were court cases. I forgot when they were held, but there were court cases, of course, where they did talk about how slaves are property and stuff like that. This was, of course, after this time. But actually, for him to do this, he himself actually had a court case in I think it was Virginia. Uh, and he actually had to have a court case because his slaves, like I said, black people owned slaves, way back in the day. This is in 1600s, right? And his slave was like, "Hey, I did my labor. I'm trying to go free like all the other slaves." And he was pretty much like, "Nah, nigga, you my slave for life." And surprise, surprise, That definitely came back to bite us in the ass. Because every other slave after that, white people was like, oh, hold on. You telling me they slaves for life now? Yeah. That did not work out well for us at all. But let's get back on topic. I'm sorry, there's so much information here, people. I'm gonna try not to take up too much time, I promise. Okay, so as I was stating earlier, I do believe it was the emasculating of the men first. Because, and there's many reasons why this is. Because when you emasculate the men, you emasculate the group of individuals that are supposed to protect and provide for whatever civilization you have. Actually, I believe it's a tactic that I'm aware of. Shout out to, hey, what's up, Mr. Real Estate? Shout out to him. Actually, I believe it's a tactic of, when you conquer your enemies, they actually slaughter the men, usually, because the men are the biggest threat. The women aren't that big a threat. Let's just be real. You can physically, dominate the women. The average guy can, easily dominate a woman. And the children, they're children. You can, I mean, if you refer to a video I did a couple days ago where I say it's easier to tame a cub versus a full-grown wild lion, that's actually a similar reason too, because you kill the full grown lion that is absolutely going to resist you the first chance it gets. You know it. It's not going to easily go into into a servant role, because as men we are dominators, we are leaders. We don't naturally serve like that, submit like that. It's not. We're supposed to conquer in a way, right? Of course, there's a hierarchy. We understand that, but so the men that conquer the other group or the other civilization, what they tend to do is they get rid of the men, all of them. This is historic fact. This is all the history. And if you know anything about the spoils of war, that includes the women and the children. That's what the spoils of war refers to, right? Because to some extent, the women will actually more than likely serve you because they value their lives. I talked about earlier, women like honor and all that kind of things. All they care about is themselves and to survive. Yeah, that kind of thing, right? Well, the children, on the other hand, you can actually raise them to be servants or whatever the hell you want them to be because they're children. Now, depending on how old they are, it might be a little difficult for them to align with whatever it is you want. I don't want to have to keep talking about the evils of this stuff, but you know what happens. People refer to as being buck broken, that kind of thing. They break them mentally and then turn them into slaves. So, of course, the younger the children, the better because you can teach them and all that stuff. I'm talking about a lot of dark psychology here, right? So that's why the women and the children aren't as big a threat as other men because they know the other men will kill them the first chance they get. They were at war with those men. So it's not easy to turn a whole race of men into slaves unless the race of men were children or completely broken. And there are ways of breaking people. Of course, only certain people broke. As we know, a lot of the black leaders in society today, the men were assassinated. There's a reason for that. It's because those group of men that eventually throughout time consistently created problems for the dominant society, and they were the men that were resistant to change. They wanted better for themselves, etc., etc. Therefore, the dominant society does what it does best, which is eradicate them, take them out of the picture to make it easier for those that would align with them to naturally align. Now, there are still some people out here, like myself, whom just don't like the way things are for a reason. I mean, obviously, I'm nobody's servant. I don't think of myself as being anyone's servant. But I do want to live a nice as I can, and I don't like being screwed over or fucked over, or to make it seem that way. And yeah, truth is stranger than fact. Like some people really, some people really don't. You know, I've come to learn that. I will say that I've come to learn that the truth is often, oof, it's yeah, the truth is often much worse or weirder than people think. But back on topic. So there is the reason why you want to emasculate the men, because when you do that, you pretty much get rid of the biggest threat to when it comes to dominating an entire group or society of people. And then after that, it's pretty much free game, because now all the men that you have emasculated, they're pretty much not going to stand up to you. In fact, they might even go so far as to kiss your ass to try to fit in or become favorites to you, so it can actually work out in your favor. So that's why you want to emasculate the men. That's what had to happen, or has been eventually happening over time. Because mind you, don't believe what people tell you. Don't believe that there was 400 years of just black people breaking their backs just doing a bunch of slave labor. Oh no, there were a lot of revolts and war. There were, they might tell you about the black people that was being lynched and everything, but there was a lot of white people that died too. Trust me, there were. Slavery did not end out of the kindness of white people's hearts. No, it ended because they realized, oh shit, all these Negroes outnumber us, and then as soon as that next revolt comes, they can wipe our asses out. That's where the dark psychology came into play, because I will give them this. They definitely they definitely worked on perfecting the art of dominating the mind. I will say that, because they realized that they could no longer physically dominate black people, because, in the South, in certain areas, black people actually outnumber them. As a matter of fact, I believe Florida was a if you know anything about the Seminoles in Florida, it was a group of black fighters that kept that state free. Yeah, so they'll like I said, they'll tell you historically black people were slaves and weaks. No, that is not a fact. There were the group of black people that were slaves, and then there were the group of black people that were to the dominant society a problem, and they were a problem because the dominant society at first, when they tried to play the mind games to say, oh, black people are okay being slaves, black people are weak-minded, etc., etc. Well, it's hard to say that when you have this whole group of black people that are absolutely dominating and destroying you. So that's why those black people were a problem, because they were literally refuting their first efforts to try to say, oh, white people are just naturally genetically more gifted than black people. And that was not a fact at all, because they constantly had this group of black people that were actually whooping their asses in business, in war, and everything, pretty much. So that refuted that fact. That's why they were a problem, because they were going against the greater society, and they weren't adhering to what they wanted people to try to believe, because they were trying, the first efforts, they were trying to make it to rationalize what they were doing to this group of black people. Of course, overseas, they were getting rid of slavery, one state at a time, and then they looked at America, which was supposed to be the big brother of the world, eventually is what it became, and then they were looking at America like, oh, y'all still got slaves and that kind of thing. So black people in America were more so like a stain on America's history, if anything, because they tried to make it seem like we weren't as capable as we are. And because we were more capable than what they tried to claim, it's like you lie. Say you go to court for something and you lie about something in court, and every day you're in court, you have to look at the face of the person that literally refuted what you lied about. Like, you stood up in court and lied about something, and then someone takes the stand as like, yeah, you're an absolute liar. this person absolutely lied. And then you have to take that person to work with you. That's kind of like what black people are today, at least as a race. We absolutely refuted everything that they were trying to say about us and, and the society and the world. As a matter of fact, like I said, we've literally created damn near everything in America. So we actually outdid them, ironically. They still can't build a lot of the stuff that that it has been built in Africa today. So it's like we've literally so now we've literally called them a liar in the court of law, and then now they have to take us to work with them. That's just imagine the tension there. But yeah, that's kind of how it is. I'll just give that analogy. Now, on top of that, when I say that what came first, people like to refer to the masculine women and the emasculated men, the feminine men. Well, there was the women became our women became masculine, but here's why. Naturally, men are supposed to be the survivor, the survivalists. We're supposed to be out there doing all of the manual labor, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what happens when because mind you, the reason why that is because to make a woman more feminine, they have to feel more secure. And as guys, I talk about this in an earlier video where as guys, we do all that manual labor and all that other bullshit. So when we come home, our ladies can be dainty and cute and not dirty and clean and feminine. That's how the more work you do as a man, the more feminine your woman should be. Well, what happens when the men are emasculated? Well, the women have to become more masculine because now they have to get out here in the world and do more work themselves. Because masculinity is actually a trait of survival. If you want to think about it like that, in order for you to dominate and conquer in the world, masculinity is actually a natural trait for that. It's why it is at the top of the hierarchy when it comes to dominating and building and all those masculine factors that I talk about in the Trials of Men series. You know, talk about men of virtue, talk about respect, all that stuff in the Trials of Men series. So when you emasculate the men, it naturally leads to the women becoming more masculine. One of the things I also talk about, since people always want to relate this to black women, which it is true. I mean, like I said, hundreds of years of their men being emasculated by the dominant society, of course, the women are going to have to do more work themselves because their men have been emasculated, shunned from society. Now, I'm going to have to come back to that because that's important too. Hold on to that. Now, in addition to the men being, what I was talking about earlier, well, when the women become more masculine, they're the less ideal mates for the masculine men. In fact, they become competition because that's what masculine men do. We see masculinity, we compete, we try to conquer, we dominate, especially if you don't look like us. There's a reason why race plays a factor in this. People tend to group together with people that look like them, that share their image. I talked about that's one of the things that I took from reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and he talked about that. He was it was during his pilgrimage, um, over out west, and he was talking about Islam and how everybody didn't really, it wasn't that race issue wasn't as strong as it was then. I mean, I still don't think it is now, but they were more so aligned with their spirituality and their religion far more than it was race. Like he was talking about how different all the different colors of people, they all helped one another and all that other stuff. But he did recall, and I'm glad he did this because he recalled that because it's natural. He did recall that instance where he was in a big old crowd of people, like thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, right? And he of different of a variety of races and everything. And he himself noted in his autobiography, he was like, he noticed that all the similar colored people started to slowly group together in their bunches. And he related that to how people like to be around people that share their images. That's natural. That's actually a natural, animalistic, human factor, a trait. That's what we do. We like to be around people that share our image. And, but like you said, none of those people held any type of hostility towards one another because they were still, you know, although they were all strangers to one another, they naturally grouped together with people that looked like themselves. They were similar race and color, but they weren't hostile towards one another. That's one of the reasons why. And I've seen this myself. Anytime I'm out in a group, say school, or if you go to church, or if you go to a gathering or a function, I've always noticed, oh, there's always that group of black people. There's always the group of Asian people that all group together. There's always the group, of course, the white people group together and talk to one another. All of them are strangers to one another, but they naturally group with people that look like themselves. I've noticed that myself. And I was actually glad that he did note that in his book because that is a fact. That's just what people do. But the problem is where the hostility comes into it. And of course, there's the economical factor. That's one of the things Dr. Claude Anderson talks about, economics. So imagine you like to group around people that look like yourself, but at the same time, you're competing with everyone that doesn't. And that's why race plays a part in it. Because people see and sympathize with people that look like themselves and they can relate to, and then everyone else is competition, right? So that's why race plays a factor, right? Now let's get back to it. Okay, so now the masculine women are competition to the other groups of men. Now we can talk about the bed wenching and all that stuff. Malcolm talks about that crap too in his book. And mind you, he wrote that book. Uh, yeah, Race Clicks. He wrote that book. I think it was like back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s is where he's detailing his life and whatnot. And he was talking about how people mingled with one another, especially after, before and after segregation. You had the white women, some of them married, whom would sneak out and find their little bucks. That's a black man that's used for sexual purposes, for those that don't know. They'd find their black bucks to have their fun with, and then you had the white men, of course, that would do the same and find their bed wenches. This was going on even then. So a lot of that bed wenching and bucking that's going on today is not even new. It's been happening. And there's a reason why I say that. Because people think a lot of this stuff that's going on today is new. The hoe culture, the weak and masculine men, usually the whole culture comes from the masculine women, trying to do what they have to do to hustle and survive. But there's a reason why I say that. No, this has been going on for a while. For a while. Probably for the last at least 200 years. But people do this thing where all of our old elders are righteous and pure and clean. Everybody, damn near everybody, thinks their mom is a saint and was a virgin before she met daddy. That is not true. And people like to do that with their elders. They like to see them as being holy and righteous and all this other stuff. Nah, nah. I'm here to tell you that that's not. I'm here to tell you no. That's not how it was. Some of them was hoes, and some of them was punks, emasculated men. It wasn't all pretty. Trust me. I've gotten this from people that were alive then. You had bed wenching. You had plenty of cooning and buffoonery. Plenty of cooning and buffoonery. Oh my God, Malcolm talked about that in his book. I also heard from it from Dr. Claude Anderson and all these other people. There was a lot of cooning and buffooning. People want to hold up this lie that all of them was marching with Dr. King and they was doing all this stuff with Dr. King. No, let me tell you this, and this is a fact. Damn near half the damn black population was against Dr. Martin Luther King because they was cooning and buffooning even then. So don't believe that bullshit that Martin Luther King was seen as a savior of all black people and all black people was on his side. No, damn near damn near half the entire black population here in America was against him because they was cooning and buffooning. Which is why I find the irony of how you have a MLK Boulevard damn near every major city today and how they praise Dr. Martin Luther King today, Jr., of course, today. And I absolutely know that was not the case then. This motherfucker was on the FBI's most wanted list. This motherfucker was sniped. He was fucking Judas and the priested, of course, betrayed by those around him in his circle. So, yeah, if you want to hold on that lie that people saw Dr. King like that, like how they see him today, back then, yeah, hold on to that lie. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, it is just that. It is a fucking lie. So don't believe that shit. Even Dr. King himself noted, that the black society is divided. Same with Malcolm X. Actually, they tried to put those two men against one another. Dr. King thought he could change things from within. He was working with some of the guys that was doing a bit of buffoonery themselves. Malcolm was totally against them. Of course, Malcolm was a bit of a let me stop lying. Malcolm was a radical. At one point in his life, he was. And he was very clearly against the greater society. Dr. King thought that he could sympathize with white people. And when he started to change tunes, that's really when he was shot and killed, right? But they absolutely tried to put those two men against one another, Malcolm and Dr. King. They tried to, and then even both those men respected one another because Dr. King never said anything to go against Malcolm because he understood Malcolm was needed. Same thing with Malcolm. He had his, Malcolm had his reasonings. He had his critiques, but at the same time, he was not going to down another brother because, especially in front of the dominant society that was trying to get them to fight one another. He said, "I got a bigger fight. My fight's with you, not him." Rest in peace to Malcolm. I'm sorry. Rest in peace to Mr. Shabazz as he passed away. Right, and Miss Betty Shabazz, strong woman, understanding woman. Now, let's see here. Now, why do I say what I say? Because people are trying to point the finger at one another, and it's a lot more complex than that. It's a lot more complex than saying that the men didn't do what they had to do and they ran away from the household and they left all these women alone with these children, and the women did the best they could, and then blah 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 blah. Okay, okay, let me try and say it like this. There was fault on both sides. There's no getting around it. There was faults on both sides. Like I said, half the damn black population was cooning and buffooning and doing God knows what just to get a piece of interracial sex and action, right? But that was both sides, both the men and the women. Was yeah, it was everybody. Then of course there was feminism. Now this, ladies, I'm sorry, ladies, but this one goes to y'all. This is one of the defining factors that damn near exclusively goes to y'all. Because the next one being integration, that's both. That's both the men and the women, right? However, the women could the women could already, because there were accounts of black women marrying white men already before, because it was always technically legal, because white men could, like I said, they were white men, they could, it was technically okay and legal for him to marry a black woman if he so wished. Of course it wasn't ideal in the greater society, they did, they were it had its problems, but it was absolutely illegal for a black man to even try to do the same. Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, you'd end up strung up somewhere dead if you tried. If they even thought it, right? If they even thought you whistled at a white woman, you'd end up dead. Plenty of stories like of that. So, ladies, y'all gotta take on feminism 100%. That was all y'all. I think, I mean, yeah, there was some, like I said, the psychological sorcery going on there, but yeah, that was all y'all. Guys, I'm gonna lead this integration. Y'all take on the majority of this because, like I said, the black women, they could technically, they could get a white man to marry them if they wanted to. But this whole integration thing, where making, the stuff that followed after this, I'd say maybe like 55% on the guys. I'll say that. But I'll give a little bit more to the guys on that one. But ladies, this one's 100%, 100% all y'all. I ain't even gonna lie. A successful divide and conquer tactic that worked even better than they thought it would. Go figure. The black society had never been the same. Never been the same since. Also after integration, never been the same since. It came along with that false sense of equality. Oh, people they was thinking, those coons and buffoons was thinking, oh, I'm just as good as a white person because I can be around y'all. Oh, I'm just as good because now I got a white girl, now I got a white dude, blah 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 blah. Yeah, all that. This is like 60s, 70s parties. I mean, what's the 80s known for? And aren't they known for partying? Like that's literally what they're known for. That's literally what they're known for, people. Like, are we just not going to acknowledge that? Drugs, illicit drugs, drinking, underage sex, and accident, all this other stuff, teen pregnancy. Like, we're not going to acknowledge that that's not what they were known for in like the 70s, 80s, and stuff like that. Like, are we not going to acknowledge that? Are we? Like, are we not? Because I mean, I'm going to take it into account. Just saying, I'm definitely going to take that into account. How they definitely tricked the bag away. Most of them sold their parents' houses just so they can get out there and keep partying. That's why y'all don't got nothing. That's why y'all don't have anything to inherit today. Yeah, one they sold grandma and granddaddy's house and tricked it all away for themselves. So, what came first? So I talked about what came first, but it wasn't the blame of black men or women. It was the blame of the greater society doing what it does best: divide and conquer, emasculate the men. And then naturally, what follows after that is the women have to step up. After that, try to do the best that they can do for themselves. This is the natural order of things. But I will say, after about the 1950s, things definitely took a turn for the worse. Now, the Greater Society, of course, did what it did to continue to, say it all with me again, to continue to emasculate the men. That's what the dominated society continued to do up until this day. There was a massive layoff in unemployment, I believe in like late 80s, or sorry, in the 80s. And then, of course, mass incarceration and the crack epidemic followed right after that. Both of them, both of them produced by and managed by government entities. And then, of course, for the women, just to make sure that they don't try to help their men, just so they can try to adhere to the codes of feminism and birth the sisterhood as we know today. They hand them government benefits to substitute for their guys that aren't there. And then they watch as they partake in hoe culture, which is unfortunately due to a lack of understanding or social social issues. They give birth to children outside of wedlock due to a lack of competent, capable men, because those men have been heavily not only murdered but um, emasculated. So, due to a lack of competent, capable men, instead of taking it on the chin and not reproducing or doing something stupid, they instead choose to reproduce with the what we now know today as the Pookies. Yeah, that whole 80% of the children being created by the lower 20% of the men. Unfortunately, true. Because they can't get the top 20%, because one, they weren't taught to be proper ladies. Two, they're adhering into whole culture. And three, um, what you have to realize about black women is there has never been any type of real patriarchy in black society in America. So that's why this whole feminist ordeal that we deal with today, it was picked up so heavily and quickly by black women because feminism only made it easier for what was already happening in black society. Illegitimate children were already being born at a rate that I believe is like 7 times higher than white society. It was like less than 5% in white society, and it was like 20. It was like 3%, and then it was like 25 or 26% in black society. So right there, 1 in 4 black women already were having children outside of wedlock. And this is back in like 1950s and 60s, during an era where that was shamed. So shaming was still very active, and marriage was very much promoted. But even then, you still had, you know, 1 in 4 still choosing to reproduce outside of wedlock for whatever reason. Some people can argue and say, oh, black marriage wasn't recognized. Oh, yes, it was. It was then. They just chose not to, do any of that. Also, the increase in having children by multiple men. Yeah, that isn't a thing just for today. No, it started around the same time too. So, what does this mean? Where am I going with this? So yes, today, what I have to say today, we cannot blame either the men or the women for either of these two occurring, because what happened was natural, because the greater society was to blame for the emasculation of the men. However, I will say this: the fact that black women contributed to this and continue to contribute to this even today, that is not okay. So no, they did not start this. They were not to blame for the start of this, but they sure as hell accelerated it by choosing to, like I said, adhere to feminism, by choosing to stab the men, the few men, and I mean, well, I can't say few, but at least some of the men adhered by some type of code then, because there still was some structure, family structure then, but the women definitely chose to stab those men in the back. Maybe not the majority of them, but enough of them, at least 10% of them, chose to stab their men in the back. And it's like that only accelerated over the years as they gave birth to more and more illegitimate children to the lesser and lesser of men, because then they started choosing men that weren't masculine. They purposely started choosing men that were masculine, that were emasculated, so that they can try to dominate those men and then think that they would be able to lead a household, and they failed. And then they do what women do, which is use the men as scapegoats, which is lie and say that all the men are creating all these bastard children, when in fact we know that is not what happened. So, in fact, most black men today don't have children, ironically, because of this. Because because they probably know that they can't properly take care of a child. I mean, if I'm just being honest, today there is no incentive for an underperforming man to have a child, other than the fact if he wasn't afraid to go to jail and he had nothing to lose. Like guys that are just living their life, guys are simple. Like I said, access to sex, play some games here and there, eat some food. Guys are pretty fucking simple, and guys will live a life. They will, that will be their life for the rest of their life. They are absolutely okay with that. Women, on the other hand, they are not. They are not okay with that at all. Absolutely not. Women, no. So when they get with these guys that are absolutely okay with that, they then proceed to punish them using the court systems, using whatever they can to try to force them to become masculine, capable men of virtue, or whatever you want to call them, to become producers. And then, as I talked about the sisterhood the other day, they don't want them to become that so that they can go get out there and do well in the world for society. No, they want them to become that so that they can serve them and buy them the things that they want in the world. So once again, becoming a slave, but not, instead of becoming a slave to the white society, become a slave to the sisterhood. That's what they really want. And I talked about the other night, um, one of the issues, an unforced error, actually, being not acknowledging the sisterhood. Because, like I said, the society tends to lean liberal. It tends to give these women favor because that's the society, unfortunately, guys have created. And there's enough guys that that actually try, the betas, the masculated men that I'm talking about, that actually do try to serve these women, even though it does not work out in their favor either. And they will stand up for these women because that's what they do. That's all they know. So that's why I said the capable, the competent guys, the masculine, or at least you want to be masculine guys, um, you got to be aware of that. And that's the reason why I made that, because I don't want you guys to get out there and what happened to the prior generation of men happen to you, which is these guys, you know, they thought that the women would adhere to the social contract. Oh, she'll be your wife, and you'll get out there and do your manly thing and dominate, and she'll do what she has to do to take care of the kids. Well, today, You try that, and she will absolutely. And once you don't do something she doesn't want you to do, she will divorce you, sabotage the family and the children, and then try to run your name through the muck. She'll lie on you. She has no problem lying about stuff, etc., etc. So that's why I want you to at least acknowledge the sisterhood exists, so that you can properly operate in the world. You can identify those that are part of the sisterhood, which is unfortunately the majority, but you can at least identify them and know not to go down that road of towards failure. At least that. Also, identify the buffoons out there.
LaQuisha. Yeah.
Steer clear of them because they might themselves get you wrapped up with these less than ideal women, and then you'll sabotage yourself. I mean, we just had the cocoa, goddamn.
I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco.
So it's like, do you really want to contribute even more problems to your life? Or do you want to get out here and win? Or do you not want to do either of those and you just want to sit around and complain about shit? I mean, I'd rather choose to get out here and win. I like to acknowledge the issues so that I can use that for information to my benefit. But I mean, I'm not gonna just sit around and talk about them and then just to make myself feel better, to make it seem like, you know, it's not my problem that, and I'm giving a scenario here. It's not my fault that I'm an underperforming guy that's earning $15,000 a year. Like, bro, stop. Stop. Like if you're earning less than 30,000, if you're earning less than $35,000 a year, you're not trying. You're not trying. It means you didn't learn any type of skill of any sort, because all you literally, like, you can literally double your income just by learning one skill. Get a CDL, get some sort of something to work in plumbing or something. You'll go from $30,000 a year to $60,000 a year, like that. Meaning you literally just learned a skill. And surprise, surprise, you can literally put yourself ahead of the average. Wanting to learn more about the world. Somebody has to own the buildings you go into. Somebody has to own the businesses. So if you don't know nothing of either, you don't have any type of desire to want to own anything, to build anything. And it's okay, some people don't, but just realize you're average or less, if that is the case. I'm talking to the men here. For the women, it's different. You want to sit up here and believe that your lies are real, that everybody will believe your lies. I'm talking to the women now. You want to sit up here and believe that that we're going to just believe your lies. Ladies, I'm going to tell you like this. Y'all supply me with some of the best laughs of my life because y'all really do believe that I'm just going to believe all the shit y'all say. Like y'all, I'm being facetious here. I'll be a little facetious, but let's just be real. Life is life. I'm gonna make the most out of it. And if you want to if you want to challenge my intelligence, if you want to insult me to some extent, just try to tell me that. What did I say in the early show? I did a broadcast. Lie to me, right? Yeah, lie to me. I mean, sometimes y'all just lie about the dumbest. stuff that can easily be disproven. And y'all really believe it. Y'all really think that it's gonna work. It's crazy. And y'all don't understand on the back end what really happens when you do that. Because the same way you can waste my time by trying to lie to me, you might not know I know that you're lying to me, and I can definitely waste your time by making you stick around, by continuing to deal with you without any type of how can I say it? Obligations or guarantees. All these long-term situationships you ladies are in, all these long-term relationships with no marriage. You might be able to squeeze out a few bastard kids here and there, but no real nothing. It's just a situationship. Some long-term guy you've been with some guy for 5, 6 years. There's a reason for that. Guys won't, and that's the see that's one of the things y'all don't understand about game. Like, yeah, y'all can sit up here and think y'all getting over on somebody, or y'all winning, or that you're wasting somebody's time. But the funny thing is, the same way you won't tell somebody that you're trying to scam them, they won't tell you either. And what did I say? There's no honor amongst thieves. So once a guy knows that you're running game, that you're just trying to scam him or get over on him, it's free game. It's like the game of the streets. I talked about how guys whom run the streets, you live in that street life, you're about that life. You sign an invisible contract with everybody else who's on the streets. It's free game now. It's free game. They can come up and rob you, jack you for your stuff, and vice versa. It's free game now. You sign the contract of the streets. Nobody's gonna tell you. All you gotta know is once you get in there, you're in there. And that's just how it is. So conclude, to conclude, this wasn't to point fingers or blame or none of that crap. To try to talk about what came first, the emasculated men, the emasculation of the black men, or these masculine women that emasculate the black men. As I said, the greater society had a plan. I mean, it is what it is, the spoils of war, to try to subjugate an entire race of people. It's only natural that you emasculate the men, that you eradicate the men that can't be, and they literally breed a race of people to serve. Yeah, bred like a fucking dog, people. So what came first? The emasculation of the men. Then the unthinkable happened when freedom was allotted or won. Because I don't want to say given, because freedom was not just given. Hell no, they earned that. You best believe it. But when freedom was given, and there was a fight for civil rights, there were some things utilized to thwart that effort. And one of the greatest things that came about, unfortunately, was feminism, to which the naturally more masculine black women, because their men have been emasculated by the greater society, utilized that to try to do for themselves because they were lied to and told that they could and that the greater society would support them. The greater society supported them to an extent, but not to the extent that they thought they would, because most of those women still lived and died in poverty. But they were able to create even more emasculated men and accelerate the process of continuing to emasculate their men and inevitably help the black society today get to where it is today and continue to fudge the numbers and lie about how or why it is the way it is. Because do you think the greater society had to tell me any of the issues that came from feminism, that the women literally lied about what they did, what their goals in life were, even to this day. I mean, there's too many black women today that will spit this ideology and then turn around and say, "Oh, I'm not a feminist," but the ideology is literally ingrained in them, that was given to them by the greater society. Too many. So I will say this. What came first, the emasculation of the men? But it was from the greater society, not the women. But the women absolutely contributed. That's a fact. Because the women naturally became more masculine. That's a fact. And it just made it easier for what happened to happen. What it just made it easier for what eventually happened to happen. But here's the issue. Today, today is today. We cannot go back and right the wrongs of our ancestors. We can't. But what we can do is stop lying about it and try to resolve our issues with it, acknowledge it if need be, if there are any great, I mean, because I'm not gonna lie, some of y'all have been through some things as children growing up. You have. I will acknowledge that. But you got to move on at some point. At least try to. And that's why I said it's important to, at least when I talked about the sisterhood, it's important to at least acknowledge it so that you know how to move out here in the world. So acknowledge that what happened happened. But we're gonna have to move on from this. Damn show don't need to have none of this dumb, what is the fucking gender war shit? Like, come on, get the fuck out of here with that. We don't need that at all. Matter of fact, the next one that's overdue is my rewind of the dangerous Kevin Samuels. I definitely need to do that. I kind of want to, I was gonna spruce this up with some slides and some videos and stuff, but like I said, I'm going through some training stuff at work, some family stuff. Like I had a lot of stuff going on, and I've pushed these videos back for some months now, and some new stuff came up. So it actually worked out to some extent, but I'm definitely gonna have to get back to that. Do a rewind on that. Talk about more of the issues, and talk about now that I know what I know, the real problem of it, as well as the manosphere. But what came first, the chicken or the egg? Answer, I already gave you the answer. The real answer is it doesn't matter. So till next time.